What's going on, everybody? It's yours truly, Coach Mike Dub, here with another edition of, yes, you got it, Lockdown Defense Sports Studio. We're here, as I said before, and as you keep seeing with all our content, we're here to give you daily, feedback, daily videos, all types of, things going on around the NFL, and of course the up and coming things that are happening right now. The biggest thing on the list is the draft. We're just a little bit, a few days away, really about a week away from the draft. So you're about to see, a lot of things start picking up. You're hearing a lot of teams putting out mock drafts, 7 round mock drafts. We've done our own mock draft, which you can go back and look at some of the results and see where your team may have landed. But that also means that a lot of teams are going to be thinking about who they can get on the second and third day. Who can they get that could come in and, not be maybe one of the top five in their position that everybody's talking about, but somebody who could definitely come up big. So we're here to give you some of that content. Of course, we're looking at the defensive backs today, corners, safeties. What guys are you going to be able to get in your second day? What guys are you going to be able to get on your third day? That will be able to help out fill any gaps for your team and be able to take that draft grade up from a B to an A, or maybe help your team make that next jump. So I know my team is looking for some pieces. I'm sure everybody's team is. So hopefully we can give you guys some gems. I don't know if any GMs are going to be, plugged into the same things that we're plugged in, but hopefully they'll be able to find some of these guys and get them on the field for you. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into it. First and foremost, like I talked about, we're going to be talking about our corners and our safeties. So when you think about a sleeper, for me, what constitutes as a sleeper pick is somebody that's outside of the top five or top six. Maybe in some cases, maybe not even in a consensus top 10 pick at their respective positions. Now, some positions are deeper than others. We talked about the receiver position and tight end position. This is a pretty deep year for tight ends. I feel like pretty deep for defensive linemen, edge rushers, even tackles. DBs, not so much. Maybe a little bit more depth on the cornerback side, but safeties, it's not a lot of names that you're hearing thrown out there as consensus top picks or consistent game changers that you just know are can't miss prospects. So we had to dig a little bit to find these guys. Hard to tell. Corner is not, especially deep position this draft either. So once again, there may be some people that, we may even miss and some gems that we didn't even hit on that can surprise a lot of people and come out and really contribute to teams right away. So the first person that we're talking about is actually somebody that you've heard me mention before. I think if we were to talk about this back in February, before the combine, he definitely would have been even more of a sleeper. But now I'm starting to see him creep up on a lot of people's draft boards. Some people saying maybe he could go as high as round two. In that case, that would throw him out the window for being a sleeper, in my opinion. But once again, this is a guy that may not have been as highly touted throughout the season. Maybe when the season ended, you didn't know that much about him, but in the offseason, his stock is definitely draft guys. But Darian Porter, super long defensive back at 6'3", 200 pounds, just about. He's got a good frame that's going to be able to help him get 50-50 balls. He's going to match up well with outside receivers. And of course, he has elite speed, one of the fastest times in the 40, which is important. If at any position is important, it's at corner. So he has makeup speed. He's raw. He's going to be able to come in and contribute on special teams pretty early on, which is very important, especially because we're seeing a big trend with a lot of players coming out of this draft that are going to be 24-year-old rookies or close to 25-year-old rookies because of extended eligibility on the NCAA side. He's one of those guys that was in college for 6 years, I believe, transitioned to defensive back after playing wide receiver. But when you get a guy that's, pushing 25 years old as a rookie, a 24-year-old rookie, you're going to expect them to be able to contribute right away. You're not going to have a lot of time for him to develop. And then, quite frankly, his development is, pretty close to where it's going to be for the most part at that age anyway. So he's a guy that I think will be able to help out on special teams immediately. He's a little raw at corner, only played one full season at it. But of course, his intangibles, you can't teach that. You can't teach a 6'3" corner with 4'3" speed. You can't teach, the ball mechanics and being used to being around the ball and making plays on it. Those are things that you can't teach. Technique and all those other things, you can get with him on that. You can put him in a scheme that supports it. So I think he'll be very successful if he lands with the right team. But he's a guy that I think may keep rising into training camp, and even in the beginning of the season can keep rising. I think he'll definitely find a spot on a roster, and that's the first step. Making the roster. After that, special teams. After that, who knows how high he can be up on the depth chart. I think he could definitely make some plays for a team. So he's one to be on the lookout. The next corner we're going to talk about, all right, Quincy Riley from out of Louisville, ACC guy. He's very scrappy. He's another guy that was a transfer player. He was in college for quite a while. But I like the fact that he had great ball skills. He was versatile, played a little bit of man, played a little bit of zone. He is a very aggressive corner. Better, playing press and being up to the line. There's some questions about his man technique and guarding the deeper routes. So I think he could be a good fit for a team that blitzes the quarterback, gets pressure on the quarterback. They don't depend on their DBs to have to cover a lot. 4 or 5 seconds or anything like that. A very aggressive defense. He's going to have to be coached up, but he is a very aggressive corner. He makes good plays on the ball, and he's not afraid to jump in there and get his nose into the mix. May not be the most consistent tackler, but he is going to get involved. He's going to fly to the ball. Of course, defensive coaches love having 11 hats flying to the ball, so he's a guy that they'll love to see that from. He has a lot of potential, has some upside, like I said. Very scrappy out there on the edge, could definitely play in the nickel as well. Like I said, the only thing that a lot of teams probably will be looking for him to do or looking to show more, which you didn't see a whole lot on his tape, is consistency, down the field. He was very aggressive and he had a lot of plays in the flats, had a lot of plays driving on slants, different things like that, which is an important skill set. But the one thing that, was probably keeping him from being even higher up in his rankings is probably the ability to cover those deep routes. There was some questions about his speed, but he came out and ran a 4.4, which is decent. I think it's serviceable. I think that's definitely clear that he can play on in the league at that level. But he's one that I definitely think has a high upside. His tape and his film look really good. Of course, he played in the ACC, so he played against pretty decent competition. But I think look for him to kind of make a roster and then maybe make a name for himself as somebody that you may not have thought about before. All right, so now we move over to our safeties, and we got 2 guys that we're going to feature. First is R.J. Mickens, and the biggest thing that stands out about R.J. Mickens is he's a son of a former NFL player, and definitely shows with his IQ. He's always in the right place at the right time. Played a big role in Clemson's defense. Was flying around, did a great job, sinking back into coverage, disguising coverages. Even had some times where he mirrored the quarterback. And he was able to come up big with some major plays in the red zone, major plays on third down. He's a guy that is going to be in the right place at the right time. And once again, an older player that's going to come in as a 6-year player in college. So the first thing that you're looking for that can get a rookie on the field is going to be their mental ability. How well are they able to process the game? How well are they ever, if you're a DB, how well are they able to process different route concepts and be where they're supposed to be as a safety? And I think he has that. So the mental part is definitely there for R.J. Mickens. He's going to be in the right place at the right time. And most of the time, he's going to make the play. He may not wow a lot of people with a lot of spectacular big hits or, one-handed grabs and things like that. But he's going to be serviceable. He's not going to give up, super big plays. He's not going to miss a whole lot of tackles. He's going to be the guy that, like I said, is in the right place at the right time just to do the right thing. So if you're looking for a wow guy, which a lot of times first rounders are, he may not be that, but he may be a serviceable guy that could come in, be a role player, and potentially, help out a team immediately. And like I said, the thing with sleepers, the good thing about them is a lot of times they're going to end up in better situations than some of the top guys because, teams that aren't picking high in the draft are going to have shots at him. So he may land in a spot where they already have a pretty good defense. He may land in a spot where he's behind a vet and they're just looking for someone to, kind of fill the shoes of the vet when the vet moves on. You never know. So that situation would be great for him. The sleepers that I have are not necessarily guys that are going to come in and change a franchise around right now. Like I said, these are guys that are going to be best fit in systems that are already established, cultures that are already established, perhaps paired up with a vet or two that can show them how to be a professional, show them how, different tricks of the trade. But at the same time, they'll be able to contribute in different packages and special teams as well. And I think RJ Mickens is that guy. And last but not least, we're going to talk about Andrew Makuba from Texas. Now, if you watched the game against Georgia, if you watched the game against Michigan, this is a guy that was all over the place in Texas' biggest games. He was flying around. He lays big hits. Of course, that's not even something that you see that often anymore because of targeting, but he's able to, avoid the targeting zone and able to get those big hits on those ball catchers while at the same time avoiding, the penalties. And of course, in the league, that'll be avoiding the fines. But at the same time, he's able to feel his presence. One thing, if you watch the film, that stands out is you can feel this guy's presence. You talk about a safety that can run the alley. That's him. He's going to come down here. He's going to lay a hit. He's going to try to get around the ball. He's going to be, a presence on whatever defense that he is around. So I think he's probably the closest thing. I mentioned Darian Porter as well, too, but Darian Porter and Andrew Makuba are probably the two closest things that I would say are like borderlines, maybe not even sleepers, because they had so much of an impact. For in the case of Makuba, he has so much of an impact when you watch his film that you definitely can see him being a playmaker. Definitely can see him being one of the big DBs in this draft. And really, if you paid attention to Texas, it's a sleeper because he's outside of the top five, I believe. And, when you talk about the safeties, but at the same time, he's one of those guys that could come in, contribute right away. And you could say to yourself, all right, I'm not surprised. He was definitely a ball player when he was in college. So once again, if you're looking for a guy that can run the alley, lay some big hits, and just overall have a presence, that's the biggest thing about, safeties is you want a guy that could play, sideline to sideline and just always be around the ball. He's the guy. And the thing that I like best about him is he had his best games in big time moments. So the saying goes, big time players make big time plays in big time games. Makuba definitely stepped up to the plate. Of course, Texas had a pretty tough schedule in the SEC and going in the college football playoff, and he stepped up big in those games. And I think that'll translate well for him in the league. So those are my guys that I would say take a look at. Once again, they're guys that you may have heard of, maybe you haven't. But if you followed the scouting process, you probably, heard rumblings of these guys, or more importantly, if you've watched college football this year or even the past 2 years, you definitely heard these guys' names mentioned. But, they're guys that teams can probably get, if not in the second day, maybe even the third day. It could really, help contribute to a team right away, if not special teams, then in a package. And like I said, maybe even pair it with a vet and down the line be able to take over the reins. So, of course, we're just 1 week away from the draft. Of course, leading up to that, we have a lot of good content coming up. So make sure you follow us at all of our socials. Make sure you tune in, comment below, let us know your thoughts. Who do you think are going to be the sleepers at your respective positions? Who do you think your team is going to be able to nab in the second, third, fourth, fifth, maybe even the seventh round? Share it with us. Maybe you'll hit the nail on the head. Maybe you'll strike out and miss. I doubt that though. I think we got some pretty good picks on here, and I think that our audience will have some pretty good picks for their sleepers as well. So that's all we got for you today. I'll see you all later.